Developer session with Torment's Tides of Numenera. I'm Chris Pratt from Eurogamer, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome one of probably the most genuinely enthusiastic people in video game development. He's the creative lead on Tides of Numenera, and I'd ask you to give a big, warm round of applause to Mr. Colin McComb.
Hello, thank you. Hi. How's it going? No? All right, good. It's great to be back in England, and especially here at EGX. Thank you guys very much for having me back. Let me give you a short introduction in case you don't know who I am. My name is Colin McComb. I got my start in gaming about 25 years ago. Oh God, my kidneys. At TSR, writing Dungeons & Dragons stuff. I worked on the Birthright campaign setting and also the Planescape campaign setting, and it is on the strength of that I got invited to go work at Black Isle Studios, where I was fortunate enough to work on Planescape Torment. I also worked on Fallout 2 and Wasteland 2 and just a whole passel of tabletop RPG products. So that's enough about that. I think it's probably time for me to skip past the introduction there and tell you about what I'm doing now. Not that. All right, what we are is essentially... Jesus, did I screw this up? I sure did. No, I didn't. Today's talk, awesome, is about developing believable characters and reactive stories in games. If you're expecting the Men of Game Development swimsuit calendar shoot, that's next door. So anyway, as I said, we're making a single-player, story-driven science fiction fantasy RPG set on Earth 1 billion years in the future. Let's talk about what that means. So 1 billion years is a long time, right? I mean, for a little perspective, about 1 billion years ago, multicellular life started on Earth. The dinosaurs are closer to us than 1 billion years ago. So, it's a long time. A lot can happen in that time. And in our case, what we have said is that countless great civilizations have risen and fallen on Earth. Civilizations with the power to punch holes through space and time. Civilizations with the power to rekindle the dying sun, or to shape continents, or to seed the atmosphere with nanites. But, like I said, 1 billion years is a long time, and all of those civilizations have fallen, whether, they've disappeared, whether through decline or extinction or just sort of simply dying out. They're gone now. And all they've left behind are their tools. So about 1,000 years ago, humanity returns to Earth. And, they've got this medieval mindset. They don't understand everything that's around them right now. Arthur C. Clarke, this is his third law. He said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And so for the humans of the Ninth World, what that means is that they're just surrounded by high magic, incomprehensibly powerful. And for us as writers on this project, it meant we got to just go completely crazy with our ideas. But even with all that freedom, we wanted to tell you a story about you. It's not a story about saving the world. We've all saved the world so many goddamn times. It's just like, oh God, do I have to do it again? We didn't want to tell a story about saving a princess because we already know she's in another castle. Thanks, Toad. No, we wanted to tell a story about you, with you, about your choices, and to interweave all of this with our primary themes, which are legacy and abandonment and mystery. But to do that, we need to make some people for you to interact with. So we're going to take a look at some various methodologies here. There's a whole host of ways that we can do this. So I'm going to give you just like a very quick overview on one way to do it, to build and understand characters. And once you have a handle on who they are, you have a handle on how they'll react to the stories that you're trying to tell. So this is one good method, which my colleague Gavin uses to great effect. He's really good at it, but unfortunately, he guards the location of his magical pools jealously, and I understand that, they're less common in other parts of the world anyway, so maybe not this one. Let's go with a different option. So author Sam Sykes suggests that many fantasy writers start off writing because they're essentially gamers. They're tabletop gamers, and so they've started playing like Dungeons and Dragons, and so they understand their characters through the prism of alignment, especially their antagonists. RPGs are a great way to act, to empathize, to really interact with the characters and how other people think. So, this is a great way to understand both the characters you make and the people you meet in the real world. So, you start off at alignment. We're like, okay, so this is an orc, and because orcs are brutish and cruel, but also live in tribes, that must make them lawful evil. And, that's pretty simplistic. It doesn't get at why orcs are bad. It's savage, brutish, organized into tribes. So we want to start looking at that why. So the first thing we ask is, what's it like to grow up in that society? What sorts of societal pressures would an orc have when they grow up around all this standard orcishness? We filter this through our own perspectives, and we think, how would we react in this case? But, given that framework and understanding their culture, we develop also a certain moral relativism. We're like, oh, well, if they were raised to eat human flesh, then it's okay. I eat cow flesh. I don't consider myself evil, right? And for all of you fellow vegetarians out there, this is where we can say, yeah, of course you're evil. But, let's not be gloating dicks about it. So, anyway, remaining here at perspective, while valuable, it excuses way too much. It lets us lapse into stereotypes. Culture can provide us with a basis for understanding, as does alignment, but it still paints way too broad a brush. So it's at this point that we can evolve into a more personal understanding of our characters, not just their societal backdrop, but about them personally. And it's that personal understanding that really lets a character shine. For the most part, if you're developing an antagonist, it's best to focus on them as heartless, not evil. For the characters you're developing, most people in general are pretty cool and not heartless. Flat out evil can also be really interesting as a motivation, but even then you need to understand why it is that somebody is truly, purely evil. What does an evil person actually want? So we've got that framework of alignment and perspective, culture, etc. Now we're going to explore what our characters desire. So we're going to look at yet another tool, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but I'm about to bring it up. This gives us some really excellent motivations. We're going to start at the bottom here. The physiological needs, base survival. That's a basic function of life itself, right? Even bacteria struggles mindlessly to survive. And survival makes a great story. There's a lot of great games about just base survival. But a game filled with starving people isn't Torment. So we wanted to give our people nobler motivations. It's not to say we don't have base survival as a motivation, but most of ours aim a little bit higher on the pyramid. Most of them. So, we've got the safety needs. That's also very great. But again, that's security. We're going to move into love and belonging. These are excellent motivations. Whether society or peer groups, we're herd animals. Our need for belonging and acceptance is hardwired into us. We just have to have it. That's why people in solitary confinement go crazy, because they have lost the sense of the people around them. Loneliness is a fantastic motivator, and I think it's one that all of us can relate to as well. And similarly, once we have that sense of community, that sense of belonging, when these needs are taken care of, we want to feel that we're valued members of that community. We want to feel that we're being recognized for our work, that our contributions are valued. And when we don't get it, we lash out, either by becoming less productive at work, or being less cool at home, or by writing angry screeds on message boards or product reviews. And when we lack that external recognition, we either have to inflate our self-confidence ourselves, see the Dunning-Kruger effect, or we begin to suffer an inferiority complex. So self-actualization, Maslow said, it may be loosely described as the full use and exploitation of talents, capabilities, potentialities, etc. Some people seem to be fulfilling themselves and to be doing the best that they are capable of doing. They are people who have developed or are developing to the very top of their potential. And this is a great place for a villain to be, just a fantastic place for a villain to be, when you hope to make somebody more powerful, more capable, more interesting. If you can write a story with a hero and a villain, try swapping them. And if you can make the villain seem at least sympathetic, if not outright the hero of that story, then you know that you have made a good villain. And most antagonists wind up here, although some still wind up higher. But wait, Colin, you say, there's no more at the top of the pyramid here. Ho ho, I say. All right, forgive me my crappy art. But Maslow added later on in life, he added a top part of the pyramid, self-transcendence, giving yourself to a higher purpose. And this is where most protagonists are, people who are willing to sacrifice their lives, people who are willing to try to make the world a better place at great cost to themselves. And you know what? Some awesome villains belong here as well. You know, I mean, the idea of shaping the world in your own image is incredibly attractive, right? I mean, who better to be in charge of the world than you? By which I mean me. I'll be taking applications later for henchmen. So our motivation helps define the character. Our background helps define the character. But these backgrounds and desires, they don't happen in a vacuum. Occasionally, their motivations come into conflict with other people's, and that's where stories come in. But that's not where stories come in right now. We're still talking about characters. If you've done the background on your characters, you know where they came from, you know their names, you know their cultures, and you know how they feel about a wide variety of issues. And now you just need to figure out how they talk and how they interact with the world. And fortunately, we came up with a tool for that too. It's not actually a tool so much as it is just a quick trick to figure out how people talk. The GNS is the genital naming system. Basically, we realize that you can tell a whole lot about somebody by what they call their private parts. You think I'm joking. But, okay, let me throw out a few more family-friendly terms. Undercarriage, wedding tackle, crown jewels. The kinds of people who use these phrases, and if you throw an accent on each of them, you get a really clear definition of the character, right? So, you know, undercarriage, you might picture somebody who's like, you know, saucy, mechanically inclined. Wedding tackle, a blustery sailor type. You know, once you've got a handle on what they call their junk, you've got a great way on, you know, a great tool into how they see the world. And even if you disagree with my interpretations, you know, you're already actively shaping the voice of this character in your head. You already know who this person is who calls it their undercarriage. So that's a win for everybody. So we had a lot of fun with the GNS, you know, and a lot of fun building up, you know, all the other stuff. But that's still, you know, basic character building. Once we've got all that stuff ironed out, especially for a game like Numenera, you know, we need to start blending these guys into the world. The most important thing of all for NPCs, if you guys are making NPCs, you don't want them to just be a vessel for the story, just waiting for the PC to show up and be like, hey guys, let me tell you about this thing. You know, they need to have backstories and motivations and characterizations of their own. I mean, you don't have to do all this work necessarily. It's certainly possible to wing it and just invent all this stuff on the fly, but it's a much riskier option. If you lose the thread of your character, it can be really hard to get it back. And you generally don't want to spend this kind of effort on a fluff NPC. You want it to count. It becomes a whole lot easier with experience, too. It's easier to hear their voices. But if, you know, you're hearing voices, I recommend writing it down, because otherwise they're going to lock you up. All right, anyway, back to making people weird. On Earth, 1 billion years in the future, there's a whole lot of things that can get into someone. And you've got ordinary medieval people surrounded by all this incomprehensibly powerful stuff. Even a base-level human is going to have significant access to the treasures of the old world. The very air is suffused with nanites that have the power to make incredible physical changes in somebody's body. There are ancient machines pumping radiant fluid that just spray across people. There's old batteries and engines lying around, pathways to alien new worlds that can open up at a moment's notice where reality is thin. You know, Sentient crystals can refract messages of silicon beauty across dying worlds. There's no person in this world who is untouched by the Numenera. The question is to what extent they're changed by it. But, humans are resilient. We're adaptable. We build our knowledge of the world into who we are. Think about how you guys have adapted to the world around you. Here's some examples. 10 years ago, we had no smartphones. 20 years ago, most people had barely touched the internet, and it cost a bundle to call somebody a long distance. 30 years ago, we still had the Berlin Wall, and it was only geeks playing D&D. So, it's pretty cool. Humans surrounded by all the science stuff, they'd adapt, especially if they grew up around it. And keep in mind that most people are pretty sedentary. In a medieval setting, that's even so much more true. Most people would never go more than 50 kilometers past their birthplace. But for people who've been altered by the Numenera, people who are fascinated by it, they would explore. And they'd have stories, really cool stories. People like Canadu and his partner El Ginto, for instance. So, as you may or may not know, Torment was crowdfunded on Kickstarter and through continuing pledges later. Backers at a certain pledge level could create NPCs for their game, for our game, rather. They provided names and short backstories, and they said, yes, it's totally cool to kill this guy, or I will totally withdraw my pledge if you do kill me. I'll be pissed off at you about that. So we said, cool. And we folded those NPCs into the game. We tried to make them a natural part of the world. We basically folded them into our lore. Our feeling was that we should make them feel like a part of the game as opposed to tacked on as an afterthought, because that wouldn't be doing us any favors, it wouldn't be doing them any favors. So some of our more memorable characters were actually created by the backers. These two explorers here, by the Nyctemeron, that's also what we call a floating laser deathtopus. They've captured it and brought it into the city here to display it. We'll be talking about that. They were backer NPCs. Actually, fun side note, these were the ones who inspired the GNS, just in case you thought I was joking earlier. This is how easily talking like the character can lead you to more details about them and even shape their stories. All right, so now we're going to get into the grittier aspects of the talk, and you guys can see some of the tools that we're working in. I'm going to be showing you parts of the process. We're licensing Obsidian Entertainment's editing tool, essentially. This is the same one they used for Pillars of Eternity and Neverwinter Nights. But first, we're going to talk about what it means to really design a responsive story. What we're trying to do with Torment, with players, is to give you a chance to define that story, to create reactivity throughout the game so that the world will change based on your actions. Obviously, we didn't want to go mad with this. We needed to have some structure. We track a whole lot of variables throughout the game, like how you treated people, what promises you've made, what step you are in a quest, what items you have, what you've done at key moments in the game. A whole lot of different things. But to create just an eternally branching story with no structure, we're not that big a studio. But fortunately, we do have secret weapons. Our area design lead, George Zeitz, and our amazing design lead, Adam Heine, they're working hard to bring our areas to life with help from Jesse Farrell and Joby Bednar. I'm going to walk you through the creation of one of our non-critical quests from early in the game, so I'm not going to spoil the overall experience. But one important mantra that we had from the very beginning of this process was make failure interesting. We didn't want people to be getting into the game and trying a task and they fail and they're like, oh, well, screw it, I guess I'd better reload. We wanted to make it so that failure was actively folded into the story so that when you fail at the game, it's cooler. There's actually quests in the game where if you fail, better things happen. It means that if you don't embrace failure, then it means you're essentially missing out on the chance to make the world responsive. So here's a strategically blurred critical path chart for the start of the game here. We streamlined this a whole lot more since, giving our players even more freedom. But we still needed to find a way to create a coherent story while still allowing for a wild variety of play styles. In order to accomplish this, we used our physical and architectural limitations on the hardware to define what we call zones, which are essentially major adventuring areas that are loosely tied to the stages of the game. For instance, Zone A is, this is zone, well, at the top is Zone A. That encompasses the Reef of Fallen Worlds and the city of Sagas Cliffs, which if you've played the beta, you've seen already. When that zone ends, we board an airship, never to return to the city. And we do this for each of the zones in our game. I mean, not an airship, but we shut you out of the previous zones. When you finish one, you're done with it. There's no going back. This allows us to close out the zone and the quests within it. So we don't want to have unsatisfactory reactivity later on. You know, you return to the city after, you know, your triumphant quest, and some guy's like, hey, you were supposed to save my kittens from the building that was on fire. You jerk. You know, that sucks. We didn't want to do that. So, and also more importantly, we wanted to have some sort of reasonable limits on what we were tracking throughout the game, because otherwise we'd have just gone completely crazy. So our first step is to create a narrative outline for the area. What do we want to accomplish in this area? What narrative points do we need to hit? What advances the overall story of the game? So we construct the zone around these requirements. And then we can start filling in the rest of the area with the side quests and the less critical NPCs that still thematically support the overall vision of the game. And after we create the important parts of the zone, we need to figure out how all the other NPCs interact with these parts. We want to make sure the player gets to the proper signposting for the area without having every NPC in the area go, you should go talk to Barb the Butcher. I'll bet she has something important to tell you. God, I hate that. I see my earlier comments about building believable characters and not making them story vessels. So we develop out our characters, either through inventing them whole cloth or taking input from our other sources. And then we draw the maps of the zones, and then smaller maps for each area. That's George's art you can see there. And not on the left, that's one of our concept artists who did his thing. This helps determine the narrative flow through the area. What George did here in Circus Minor was ensure there is plenty of interesting material for the player to interact with, while at the same time making it easy for the player to move toward the primary quest givers of the area, who are up there at number 10. Part of George's design philosophy is to facilitate the player's forward progress without making it obvious or even necessarily easy. So part of the interesting material that we want to develop, obviously, is visual. But being the Torment team, we also did it with prose to the tune of about 1 million words in the game. It's a lot of writing. Oh, sorry. So George came up with a number of different activities that the player could engage with, creating some quest outlines and their desired outcomes. And George came up with the characters in all of Zone A here pretty much, and then Gavin and I took his notes, and we ran with those quests and those characters, and we got to work. So here's what some of those conversations look like, and this is just for one quest. So all the red nodes are the NPC talking. All the blue nodes are the player choices. From the start over here, you know what, I'm going to walk over here and show you guys. So over here on this very first level, these are all possible entry nodes that the player can have going into the conversation. So each of those requires different conditionals to get into each individual node, and then it branches out from there. So you can see that we've got a lot of options. So we really wanted to make it so the player would not feel railroaded into a decision. So a moment ago, when I was talking about quest design, I said desired outcomes. And by desired outcome, I don't mean best outcome. We've tried very, very hard to make a variety of endings that feel valid and worthwhile. We don't ever want a player to finish a quest and go, but that doesn't make any sense. That's not how that should have turned out at all. We want to empower our players enough so that even if a quest doesn't go their way, they can still feel like the story is moving in an interesting enough direction that they will stick with it. We want our players to feel free. So let's explore how that happens. This is a quest called Beliazar and the Beast. So these two dudes down here in the bottom left, that's Canadu and El Jinto. They've captured this flying laser deathopus and are displaying it prominently here in the town square. If you try to interact with the cage, the glaive, the warrior Canadu. He shoots you a dirty shout about trying to get a glimpse without paying for it. So right away, that tells us, without having to go into a really long description, about that this creature is a captive, these guys are its keepers, and that they're hoping to make some money from it. So we've got several options. We can just walk away and ignore these guys, totally valid choice. The second choice, we can talk to Canadu and find out about paying. He'll tell us we need to talk to his partner. If we try and coax anything more from Canadu, we'll learn that he's just a very gruff guy and he doesn't like talking to us. And he's really unwilling to share anything more with us, but he does give us a secret clue that will unlock stories from his partner. So we go and talk to his partner, we pay, and then we can talk to the Nictameron. Alternately, we can talk to El Shinto and get his stories, which then allow us to unlock Canadu's stories because we've proven that we're cool with both of these guys. We've learned that they captured this thing in order to defeat a powerful entity in their homeland, and they're basically just trying to prove out their design for this magical cage that they've created. So now we go and we try and talk to this creature, but it's all thrashing and violent and trying to kill us, and we're like, whoa, what the hell? Then Canadu says, yeah, sorry, man, that thing is always pissed off during the day. If you want to talk to it, you'll have to come back at night. So we need to advance the clock somehow. But that happens in a different quest, and that actually happens as a failure state. So if you screw that task up and reload, you would never get this extra content. That would all just be entirely gated off from you. Like I said, part of reactive storytelling is making sure that failure is as interesting as success. So that dude circled up there, that's Beliazar. He doesn't care about these guys' stories. He doesn't care about their magic cage. He cares about the creature, or more specifically, he cares about the brain inside of that thing. He is currently at the love and acceptance stage of Maslow's needs because he really desperately wants to prove himself as a scientist in the order of truth. So he's asking us to affix a device to the cage that will teleport this creature away, and then he'll ask us to go kill it and bring it back to him. Or bring its brain back to him. And of course, Canadu and El Shinto are not real excited about that. So now we have a chance to see how all of our reactivity and all of our planning and all of our character development works out for us. So here's the quest entry in tool format. For each of the states shown here, and for each step in the quest that advances it, we have a different variable or a different set of variables. We need to have variables that track the player's progress through the quest in every possible permutation. Did you recruit a mercenary? Did you affix the teleporter? Did you fail to affix the teleporter? Did you get caught? These are all different states. All of those things down there are different ending states for this one single quest. So these are just some of the various possible outcomes. We can win the fight with the Nictameron. We could betray Beliazar, but we could then get the notes from the explorers and say, okay, well, here's the notes they've got on it, so you don't actually need to kill it. We can betray him and destroy the notes in front of him because we're dicks. We can help the Nictameron escape, tell him about it, and then say, go kill it yourself, dude, good luck. Or we could go let it escape, go kill it, bring it back to brain, that's also awesome. Or we could kill it, lie to him, and then try to comfort him. These are all possible valid choices, and this is how a story fits together. It's how you make a reactive story with interesting characters. Easy. Oh, wait, no. So, in conclusion, the basics of character creation essentially remain the same across every medium, across every game. Part of the great challenge is just making that you understand your characters, making sure your characters live and breathe, that these are people who you would understand if you interact with them. We need to make sure they respond as normal people, and that challenge is learning who they are. Once you've given everyone and everything enough detail, you'll be surprised how often they will speak for you right out onto the page. And when you're telling their stories, when their motivations intertwine with the PC's goals, we want to make the interactions interesting. Every outcome should be interesting. Even failure, as in real life, should be a step forward for the characters and their stories. Once you commit to a reactive story, you have freedom to explore. It's a lot more work, but it's so much more worth it. Unless the player does something so incredibly dumb that you just have to kill them, and then you can make it entertaining, and that's almost as good. All right, thank you all very much. That's it. Oh, wait, we're going to have a Q&A, but first, is it cool with you guys if I take a selfie from the stage with you? All right, microphone's coming up, so everybody say cheese. Awesome, thank you. All right, so please don't be shy. I will be incredibly cool to you if you come up to the microphone. First person up there gets a hug. Or if you don't want it, you can tell me you don't want a hug. Come on. Or if you don't have questions, that's fine. We can all go places. Oh, we got one. Awesome.
Hi there. Just a quick question with regards to putting choices into the story. Is there ever any time where, as a writer, you find yourself with a situation where you know there's a course of action that it would make sense for it to be there, but you as a writer aren't too eager to put it in? Like, you know it's going to be a bad outcome for a favored character or something?
There are times when I am, there are times when I really am not keen on having good people die in my game, but on the other hand, I'm more married to the story than I am to individual characters, so if I can make those characters go out in a really cool way that's memorable, I consider that a win. It's really hard to get attached to characters and then watch them die. And, at the end of the day, I have to remind myself they're just words while I'm wiping away my tears. Thank you.
Hi there.
Hello.
Does the GNS ever come up in the game?
No. No.
Is it no like secret dialogue?
No, there are no secret dick jokes in the game. I'm sorry. There's plenty of secret dick jokes, but not like, hello, let me tell you about this. Yeah. No, if you are interested in seeing a racier side of the game, recruit the companion Tiber into your party. Okay. And he is a font of entertainment.
Excellent. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my question is, like the tabletop game, does it have one-use Numenera that you can pick up in the game and use, and like what are the writing implications of a player having any kind of tool and unpredictably?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question. So we do have ciphers in the game. For those of you who have not played the Numenera tabletop game, essentially ciphers are like potions or one-shot abilities, like high-level abilities. And we do have those in the game, and we do have cipher sickness for you as well. Boy, the implications of having that stuff in there, we had to design around that very carefully. Like, okay, well, can we actually drop this thing here? So we had to hand drop our loot, as opposed to having randomized loot drops, just to make sure that people wouldn't be picking stuff up too early. Because that might impact the story in other ways that we were not comfortable impacting it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, wait, we got one more?
Oh, yes, sure.
All right.
Hi, so how do you go about sorting such a vast amount of dialogues that you have in a game while keeping track of where it happens?
Oh boy, so in the dialogue editor that we have there, let me skip back to this thing up here. So you see that we've got A2101 or A1201. So that shows us that it's in Zone A, that it is in Stage 1 of the game, that it's in Map 2, and then we break it down from there. So we name that. So that's how we keep track of our characters, by zone and map on which they appear. And then as far as the variables go, we've got an entirely different, I guess, variable tracker. And we break that down by folders. And then we try and make very descriptive variable names for that. You know what? Actually, no, it's too small. Never mind. There are some variables that are listed on some of these nodes here that you might be able to see. So if we zoom in on it sometime later. But we essentially have to name each of those and then keep track of those. And that gets to be really hard. And that's actually where a majority of bugs get found in the game.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you. All right, looks like we're out.
Thank you so much, Colin. That chart is one of the most intimidating things I've ever seen. Your job's pretty difficult. Yes, I hope you enjoyed that session. We have got a couple more coming up today. At 3 p.m. there's Battlezone. The devs are going to be playing through the game. And at 4 p.m. we are talking with the ukulele team about making that wonderful, wonderful game. So please do come back for those if you'd like. And if not, a big round of applause for Mr. Colin McComb. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thanks, Ben. Well, thank you.